Hi, this is Brandon Swilling from ThursdayGym.com. Today we're doing another episode of Training Talk, and we're going to continue our programming discussions. This is part 4, and today we're going to talk about my beloved and favorite conjugate or concurrent training. So, I've already done linear, block, and undulating periodization. I'll have all those links to those videos in the description box below if you want to learn more about those programming styles. All those programming styles do have some influence on the conjugate system. So, this is what I'm usually known for, at least in the training circles, using conjugate for powerlifting and raw powerlifting. I'm going to discuss powerlifting to a degree, but I'm also going to keep this in mind of athletic training and sports performance and athletic development, I guess. It's what I do for a living, and this is the model that we prefer to use. So hopefully I can give you some really good, tangible work of how this works in a real person. So the first thing I want to get over is what I use with my interns here, and so I'm going to use the exact same thing that I discussed with them. So I'm going to try to keep this in very simple terms so that everybody can understand it, you're on the same page. And by all means, if you want something more advanced or discussed about it, just let me know in the comment section and I can make a video, something more tailored or specific towards a particular topic. So the first thing I want to get out here first is discussing conjugate and concurrent. So conjugate mainly comes from the name of conjugate sequence system, the way you sequence things. In my opinion, all training should have some conjugate piece involved. How you sequence exercises can dictate results, okay? So generally, let's say for example, I want to build a front squat in before I build a back squat. Biomechanically, you're going to use less weight, so the weight's going to build up over time. We can work on positioning better. And usually if I can teach someone a front squat, teach them a back squat's pretty easy. Doesn't always go the other way. Teach someone to back squat and then front squat, you might have some more issues with the front squat because you're trying to technically regress the exercise to an exercise that uses less load, more mobility and things like that. That's going to regress the training load that you can use, okay? So that's just an example, but usually the way you sequence your exercises, and a really dumb, easy way to think about it is your progressions and your regressions of your exercise selection. You want your exercises to progress over time, get more complicated, and then eventually you come back towards the basics again and you sequence those to see realization in your movements that you want to be best at. Whether that's sports, powerlifting, strongman, whatever, doesn't matter. Concurrent training now is training multiple qualities within the same microcycle or the same training block or week. So I like microcycle or week from a conjugate or from a concurrent perspective. Usually you're trying to touch all those qualities in 1 week. And the things that you're gonna go after are gonna be dependent on what you need, but usually you're gonna see strength, speed, power, endurance. Those are the 4 things that I think about when I think about what makes a good athlete. You usually have to have all of these to some degree, okay? Hypertrophy will kind of fall in there, mobility will fall in there, but generally you're looking at those major things to be a better athlete or be a better strength athlete. Those got to be present at somewhere, and so we're going to attack those within a given week. Now, with our athletic development kids that I work with, we can currently do this in a given session. So I may only see a kid once, twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and sometimes 4 times a week. But generally we're more around that 2 times a week. So I've got to think, I can't have a heavy day and an endurance day. Doesn't really make a whole lot of a sense. I need to get multiple stimulations throughout the week to be able to get those adaptations to occur quicker, and I should know they should be able to recover from it because they're only with me an hour at a time. 2 hours a week is really not that much training time if you really think about it, but it's plenty for the population that I work with and for athletes where the weight room is not what they're trying to be good at. They're trying to be good in the pool or the court or the field or something like that. So concurrently, I'm trying to train multiple qualities within a training session so that I can touch on everything and get better at all that and shift them to being a better athlete on the force velocity curve, okay? So really quickly, the main thing, like I just said, for the concurrent model and conjugate training, they're used interchangeably, but understand there are differences. I kind of lump them together. We're gonna aim at training all qualities simultaneously within that microcycle. And for me, that's a week, and even for some of these kids, even in a day, okay? So we've got the max effort method, we've got the dynamic effort method, and the repetition effort method. Those are the 3 methods that this system revolves around. You've got to train something heavy, you've got to train something for speed, light and fast, And then you've got to train something from a repetition standpoint. And the way I think about this is we got to use a metabolic stress and damage to build tissue and or conditioning, depending upon what that athlete needs. So something cyclic like a bike or a rower or whatever, if we need to build up endurance, that would fall underneath more of the repetition method. Okay, you're repetitively doing something, and general physical preparedness. And the thought process behind this is the bigger your base, the wider or the taller your peak can be. So you want to be very general on the bottom, and we're going to build up towards the top and being specific towards whatever that end goal is. And many athletes need to have a broad base because there's so many different movement patterns and demands in sports. We can't possibly specifically hone in on one thing. If we've got a nice big wide base, we can be good at a lot of things. And as the athlete matures and focuses towards one thing, then we can start to tailor that towards them as they mature and grow from an athlete perspective. From a powerlifting perspective, you know, a wide, big base, good, strong in multiple areas. And then once you find what you want to be good at or succeed at, then you can start to build up towards that peak strength as you begin to get older and your training age gets better. Okay, so the main things behind this system is that we're going to attempt to avoid burnout and stalling through ever-changing stimulus. So by having all these different exercises and stimuluses constantly throughout the year, and we can use different programming models into this. Well, I'll discuss that here in a minute. We're going to keep our athletes' base big, which is going to make them more resilient, which gives them the ability to be a better athlete when they hone in on that craft and they go to work on shooting a free throw or working on their long jump or doing their 100-meter sprints, things like that, okay? So we're also aimed at attacking weak links, or what people say weak points in a particular athlete. So let's say if from a running perspective, their hamstrings are really weak, you know, they for whatever reason when they run, they don't run well, okay? Their hamstrings are just notoriously weak. We bring up their hamstring strength and they start running faster, even if we don't do any running, okay? That would be a thought process behind conjugate training, is if we bring up that weak point, then we can get the outcome to be better without having to do the outcome. Makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because if something's holding you back, you want to bring up what's holding you back so it pushes everything forward, not just focus on one thing. Not saying that focusing on running can't make you faster. It certainly can. But if you're going to focus on running, you might do hill sprints, which then is going to increase the demands of your hamstrings. Your hamstrings are stronger. With hamstrings probably the thing? Maybe. I don't know. Okay? So just to give you a real world example there as well. Now, what are the pros of this system? The thought process is that it can help prevent overuse injuries. Because you're doing so many different things, your likelihood of getting injured is less because you're in more ranges of motion, you're in different positions, you're using different muscles in different planes. All that's going to make you more resilient, so if you happen to be exposed to something, you've already been in it, so to speak, okay? Training is always very engaging, so I think this is really nice. I work with a lot of athletes. They want it to be fun in here. So being able to give them different exercises, things that they like, sometimes things they don't like, but giving them different stimuli keeps them engaged in training. And if we can keep them engaged in training, then their chances of excelling outside of my weight room is definitely higher, right? So we want that. And then again, if they're continuing to train and show up, then the thought process, they're less likely to get injured because they've got more muscle around joints. And again, they're doing mobility work and things like that, that can hopefully help keep them safer on the field as well, excuse me. So the other pro is it hits all spectrums of the force velocity curve all year round. From an athlete perspective, this is a must. We've got to be able to lift heavy at times, but we've also got to have speed work in. We've even got to touch into overspeed stuff at times, right? We've got to be able to peak them for things and get their body prepared for what's yet to come in the coming weeks of peaking for a big conference tournament or something like that. If you're a power lifter, this is a great thing because if you constantly train really heavy and really slow, you begin to feel slow and you don't want to feel slow. So by being able to work on the speed of particular exercises or lifts, that can shift your force velocity curve up and to the right. That's what this whole system is about, moving that force velocity curve up and to the right, and that will see increased performance. And it does hit all those areas on the force velocity curve where some other training models don't think about that, especially from a year-round perspective, okay? It's usually got built-in deloads via wave loading or different kind of block training. So there's block and phases in here. The big thing with the dynamic effort piece is that you're Your dynamic stuff is gonna wave load, so it's going to go linearly, but then drop off. And when it drops off like that, that's almost your mini deload. Loads are gonna decrease, your body's gonna get a new stimulus, that's gonna provide a little bit of deload and let the nervous system kind of chill out, because you're not gonna have all those heavy loads, you're gonna have a week where those loads decrease. And again, that involves some undulating piece to it as well, which we discussed in a separate video. And then peaking can be done in a 2 to 3 week time span at almost any point. So the easy way to think about this, the way to be ready is to stay ready. And I know that sounds super cliche, but if your athletes are constantly training with speed in the movements they're doing in the weight room, and they're doing some strength work, they're doing single leg stuff, they're moving in a variety of planes, I don't have to work on getting better in a variety of planes. I don't have to worry about getting better in a single leg stance. I don't have to worry about getting faster. If we're constantly touching those pieces, then I know that they're particularly at least starting well. From a block perspective, when we talked about block training, I don't have to go back to that accumulation phase and get them ready for training. I've already got them ready for training. We just need to be able to ramp up for a couple weeks to get ready for a big competition or something like that. Makes it easier on my part. From a powerlifting perspective, the thought process, because you're gonna touch 90% loads pretty frequently, to go do a meet, you may only need a couple weeks to get ready and dial in some specificity and some things like that to get an idea where you're at. Now, I don't think it's the best idea. I do think there should be phases to training, and there are phases to the conjugate system, ideally, if you do this right. But the thought process is, if you do conjugate all year round, you can get ready for a meet in 4 weeks. You honestly could if you really wanted to. May not be your best meet, but you can get ready and go give a viable effort if that's really how you want to try to stay ready. Now the cons. There are pitfalls of conjugate. I don't care what everybody says. People say it's the best system ever. I drift towards it, but there are cons, okay? The first one is you obviously gotta have a higher understanding of training multiple modalities. Since you're doing so much stuff, there's more moving pieces, just like with undulating, you gotta be able to understand that, how to move that around as a coach or an athlete. If you don't understand it, it looks complicated. It seems very nuanced. And I think whenever I got into the system, that's something that worried me, was how complicated it was. And it can be complicated. You got to think about a lot. So that's a big pitfall to it. Balancing all the stimuli from that system can make or break training. You can make or break your training. You can overtrain, you can undertrain. Okay, you cannot give yourself enough stimulus and you'd be like, this isn't working. You know, I'm not getting stronger, I'm not getting faster, I'm not getting better. Well, are you under providing stimulus because you're trying to be careful? Very possible. Could you be overtraining? Could you be doing too much workload? Are your waves getting too long? Are you changing your stimulus in your exercise repertoire too frequently to actually get an adaptation? Again, very possible, and that could cause you to undertrain. Or if you keep something around too long and overtrain, or you're back squatting too frequently and starting to get elbow and shoulder issues, again, you're starting to see some overtraining issues. That's very possible too. It can, like I said, I already kind of talked about it being overcomplicated with too much variation. Again, if you put too much variation in there, then you can't build on a particular movement pattern or exercise. So I know in here with my athletes, we do the same exercises for 4 weeks in a row. We undulate the programming sets and reps more so than anything else. So we change those, excuse me, but what you'll find is that we've got to do that from a billing perspective as well to some degree. Now, with many of my powerlifters I work with, I keep accessory work in there about 2 to 3 weeks, main movements in there about 2 to 3 weeks, enough that we can touch it pretty frequently, but we don't run it for a long period amount of time. Okay, so I'll come back to it every couple of waves, every couple of blocks, and if there's things that I note that people are making good progress on, I kind of put that in my back pocket and say, when I'm getting ready for a meet, this exercise works well for this person. Chair deadlift is one of those I find for a lot of sumo deadlifters. Chair deadlift helps a lot going into a meet. So I keep that in my pocket for a lot of meet preps. Or a safety bar squat, for example, for many of my squatters or heavy squatters that are falling forward, that works well. Again, keep that in my back pocket and use it for a later date. So then my variation can go around stuff that's similar to that, but we can build it up when we need to. But again, it can be overcomplicated because of all the variations that exist. And then hitting absolute max strength is not ideal for some populations. I work with some older people, okay? They're 60, 70 years old. They are not doing conjugate max effort and dynamic effort training. I don't care what anybody says, that's not a very intelligent idea for me to 1 rep squat, 1 rep max back squat, grab ball, okay? So yeah, we're not hitting max strength. So are we really doing conjugate training? No, but we're using concurrent principles where we are doing some heavier work. We'll touch some 6s on our goblet squats, and that's okay. But we may not need maximum strength for that particular population. We need general strength. So understanding your populations and how to dose those things is very important. So, you know, I even have an older lady that also does some general plyometrics because she loves to play pickleball. All right, I would be a fool to not put a little bit of plyometric training in there because she is going to do plyometrics as part of her sport and part of her hobby. She's doing it whether she comes in here or not, so let's try to get a little bit better at it and work on some of the mechanics and have her tissue ready for when she goes to do that. So that's a good example, okay? Pushing the sleds, doing some bike sprints, things like that. Things that are athletic can be good for those populations. Just understand that you don't have to max them out, right? So that can be another con. As you're really married to the system, technically I should be 1 rep maxing grandma, but I'm not doing that, okay? So that's a very, very general understanding of the conjugate system and using concurrent training. Now, what I will tell you about this is that there's so many different varieties and who you talk to about conjugate training. There's not really a right or wrong. There's things that need to be present, but then outside of that, there's little twists, and I kind of talked to Dave Tate on his Table Talk podcast about this, was that there should be some phasic structure in it too. And I think if you use and understand some undulating and block pieces and you implement that with your conjugate training, you will see much better success in the long, big picture than if you just do straight up West Side Barbell conjugate training day in, day out for 20 years. Now, I know some of those guys are still doing stuff like that and they're still training hard, but I'll be honest with you, for the average person training that are not those rare breeds, you want to have that basic structure to your training. I think it's just from a mental and physical health perspective, that's what you want to do. And I think implementing some general physical preparedness into that is a good way to go. You know, if you don't compete in powerlifting, I think being able to go on walks and do some metabolic work 1 day a week can go a long ways. And again, we're talking about improving that base and becoming more athletic. And that base is going to set us up for everything else that we do, especially with the sedentary population that we have become. Most people just aren't moving enough in general. So by being able to get out and go on walks and do some Metcon stuff, listen, just 1 day a week, 15, 20 minutes, and that's a whole lot, that can do you wonders for your training. And that's what I really like about the system, is that I've got a lot of areas I can pull from to improve performance, both athletically and from a strength perspective, and how it influences my programming models. So that is the conjugate system in a nutshell. A lot, I can go into this to much more detail in just max effort or dynamic effort or repetition effort. Something you want to see, just let me know in the comment section. I can make those particular videos discussing that. But that's the general gist of the conjugate system and concurrent training as a whole, focusing on those multiple modalities within the small microcycles themselves. And I think you'll find that by doing some of this stuff, even if you're a block guy or an undulating guy or a Western guy, if you can figure out how to implement some of this stuff into your current training models, I think you'll find that you have some success and that more training models use stuff from this system than you'd like to believe. And that's that. So, got any questions? Let me know in the comment section. Thanks. Have a great day.